Halftime show, Terry Ford hanging out with you. David Dare playing around with us for about an hour. Then he'll take off to his new palatial estate. Gated community, right, Dave?
Yes, it is. Don't worry, the gates are there for your protection.
Dave will hang out with us for an hour. Elijah will pop in early at 2. We're just kind of piecing it together. Our buddy Ed Bird out sick a little bit, but Ed will be back hopefully, end of the week, next week, whenever we get Ed back in here. But in the meantime, we'll figure it out. As we get ready for SEC Media Days, which is next Monday through Thursday, we'll be in Dallas doing our shows from noon to 6 in Dallas. Also, updates between 6 a.m. and noon. So, like every year, we'll be hanging out at SEC Media Days. Shane talks third on Monday. So we'll see where all that goes. And we've talked about it, this year, coming off of 5-7, which was disappointing to everyone, including the head football coach. That we'll just we'll see. Just remember, what was it, a couple years ago? We had the cool little social media post with the shades and Soulja Boy and all that good stuff. And last year, it was like a Sopranos feel to the video. We'll see where it goes this year. It's been very quiet with that aspect of the program in this offseason. And I get it. I mean, you underachieved in your mind, in the fan base's mind, whether that's correct as we look back. Because once you saw that offensive line against North Carolina, you went, ooh, well, that's going to be a problem. And it was the entire year. And, the running game. And Mario Anderson kind of separated himself in the last half of the year. But, again, you went into the season hoping that the Kerryon Joyner could transition to being, a solid running back for you. You didn't know what you had with Mario Anderson, Division II guy. You had Juju McDowell, and you knew, and you still know what Juju McDowell is, right? God love him. In the best situation for Juju McDowell, he's getting the ball in space, where he can use his quickness to be an advantage. And that's really the best way to use McDowell, whether it's as a running back or receiver, whatever the case. Create mismatches with a Juju McDowell, right? So your offensive line had some depth questions, and your running back position had question marks. And now when you look back, you kind of go, well, maybe, well, I won't say you, I'll say me. I think back and go, well, maybe that 8-win idea was a bit optimistic. Because if you had injuries in the one spot, you couldn't have them, offensive line, lack of depth. And your running backs were going to need, and look, every running back needs a good offensive line. I've always said this. If your offensive line doesn't block, you can have Barry Sanders and it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. So your offensive line's got to be good, but you also at times need help from your running backs. There is a skill set to being a running back. It's not just, wow, the offensive line's real good, so you're real good. There are running backs who are good because of their offensive line. Because, when it comes down to the running back having to make a play, they can't. Or they can't very much. So it's also good to have running backs who can make something out of nothing and can help an offensive line if they're struggling a bit. And is good at taking a handoff and reading what's in front of him and making the right play with vision, balance, things of that nature. So I guess looking back on the creakiness of the offensive line and the big question mark at running back, maybe thinking, wow, this team won eight games the previous year. It's going to get even better this year. Maybe that was a role we could have slowed. But once again, when you don't have exhibition games, when you don't have preseason games, when you don't have controlled practices with other programs, you really don't get a feel of what could be an issue. And so we saw that as an issue. But anyway, SEC Media Days coming up. We'll see where what direction South Carolina goes with, maybe some of the social media messaging, the promotion, the marketing, and just the message at this year's SEC Media Days. The first time Shane Beamer is coming off a disappointing season at South Carolina. All right, speaking of Gamecock football, Darren Usher is the new Director of Player Personnel and Recruiting. That was announced earlier today. Now, Usher graduated from South Carolina. Recently, he was at Oregon, serving in the personnel and recruiting role with the Beavers. Of course, Oregon's been really good at this recruiting thing. Recruiting class for 2024 ranked as high as number 3 nationally. So then Usher moved on to join Chip Kelly's staff at UCLA as the executive director of recruiting for this upcoming season. And then, of course, Chip Kelly pieced out to become the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Then Usher returned to Oregon after the coaching change at UCLA. I mean, a nice resume, like I said, to work at Oregon in recruiting. Also was at Auburn for a couple years, and Auburn had 2 top 25 recruiting classes. Then Usher spent a lot of time at Boise State, 2014 to 2020, serving as the Broncos football operations / recruiting coordinator for 2 years before being promoted to director of football recruiting and player personnel. Now, again, Boise State had the best recruiting class each of his 7 years on staff, and that's when Boise State was still really good. So, again, good resume, coming back to his alma mater. And I think in the situation you were put in because of what happened, and you had to make a change on the fly at not the best time of year to be making a change in this job, you probably did as good as you could because, again, you kind of fell into Usher with what happened at UCLA. He just went back to Oregon. It was almost like, hey, dude, we love you. Come on back. We'll figure out something for you to do, and we'll pay you because we liked what you did when you were here, and you kind of just got screwed over at UCLA. And so he was just kind of sitting around looking for a gig in some ways. And so sometimes in life, timing's everything, right? Well, this was almost like a timing thing. And that worked out well. So you get a guy with some good experience. And we'll see where that's going to go from there. Again, it's a very vital position. Very vital position. And South Carolina, for the timing, probably could have done better. So that's the latest news from Gamecock football in that regard, is bringing in Darren Usher as the director of player personnel and recruiting. And we'll see where they can go. Again, he's coming in late in the game. I mean, it's not the end of the end of the world. You still have August, September, October, November, December, January. You still have 6-7 months till the official National Signing Day in February. And you still have months to ramp up the early signing day in December. So the world isn't coming to an end. And Usher can come in and hopefully help South Carolina beef up their recruiting class for 2024. And we've talked about this. This recruiting class, not to say it's bad, nobody knows. You'll know in 3-4 years if this recruiting class is any good, right? But it doesn't have that star sizzle that the previous couple have had. Just not there yet. Could it happen? Sure. But it doesn't feel like it's got the momentum it's had before. But again, Nick Harbor, everybody thought South Carolina had a much better chance for Nick Harbor than people were thinking. So it's not like the end of the world yet, but this has been, so far, if you stare at it from a star-rated perspective, it's been a little of a recruiting class. Tyler and I were just kind of banging this back and forth the other day. Is this because maybe with all the NIL money you use to keep your players from going somewhere else and to bring in veteran players in the portal to fill some holes you needed to fill, are you not, sitting there with a big enough NIL war chest to compete against some other schools who are going after these 4- and 5-star high school football players? I don't know. We're just throwing it out there. But, is this a change of philosophy with Shane Beamer? Because Shane Beamer has been saying, and even, I guess, earlier this year, talking about, high school recruiting is the foundation of your program. And yes, South Carolina went portal heavy to fill some needs, but I feel like it's still the foundation of the program. I think all this stuff is so fluid anyway with the world we live in. You know, maybe this was a year where it's like, look, the transfer portal kind of more important than this recruiting class for what we're doing. Because remember, this is year 4 for Shane, coming off of a 5-7. You kind of want to get this thing back in the right direction this year, right now. And sometimes you're going to have years like that where, okay, we got to really focus on the portal to beef this team up with some veteran guys who have resumes and run. And that's more important than, again, high school football recruiting is vital, but, you know, for a year maybe, you have to put that a little bit behind the upcoming season and what you have to do in the portal. But anyway, so Darren Usher is the new Gamecock Director of Player Personnel and Recruiting. That was announced today. On the show, speaking of Gamecocks, a lot of stuff's going on with the transfer portal in baseball. And now that it's shut, we're going to get our buddy John Whittle in here from the Big Spur to kind of talk about some of the players that Paul Maneri and his staff brought in to make the team better through the portal. There's some JUCO guys also signed up, transfer portal guys coming in from some other schools. So we're going to kind of get caught up with John Whittle from the Big Spur. 2:15, he'll give us the what's up on, you know, the guys that are coming in from all these other spots for South Carolina baseball. And we'll get back in here. The names of the Gamecocks at SEC Media Days. It's out, and we will discuss the 3 dudes that are rolling off to Dallas with Shane and some of the folks from the football program. We'll do that next. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, David Dare is here, hanging out with us as we roll till 3 on the game. Halftime show. Terry Ford, David Ayer punching buttons for us for a little while longer here on the game. Real quick, Dave, come on in here because we're going to went to break. I said something about beavers. Help me out, Dave. I misspoke. Help me. What did I say? What did I do?
Wait a minute. Ow. Feedback on the headphones here.
Hey, watch that. Good to see you, Chris Clark. I was going to steal those shades, Chris Clark. I had my eyeball on those things, man.
Yeah, the Beavers are Oregon
State. Yeah, I said Oregon, and I didn't say Ducks.
Yeah, the Ducks are Oregon.
Okay, in a fight, who wins, a duck or a beaver?
Well, Beaver's got those teeth. And did you ever see that movie, Zombie Beavers? I mean,
no, Dave, I never watched it.
That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
I'm sorry to hear that, Dave. I truly am sorry to hear that.
I watch that over and over.
For some reason, I can picture you sitting there. Now, your choice of snack food during that, would it be Funyuns, Cheetos, Doritos, Fritos, Munchos?
You gotta have everything there. Yeah.
Or I tell you what's very underrated is the Utz Party Mix. It's got a little bit of everything. You got your cheese balls, you got your pretzels in there, you got your Cheetos in there, you got a little Dorito action, maybe even a Tostito. You got everything in there.
Well, that sounds good. I'll have to try that. I have
very
some
underrated.
ranch bugles out there.
Bugles are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Look at you. Bugles
stick them on your fingers.
Put them on your fingers, just eat them, like when you were a kid. So I can see you putting bugles on your fingers watching zombie beavers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of scary, Dave.
It is, but hey, it's my life.
Thank you for your correction, sir. I appreciate it deeply. All right. So the Gamecocks will be taking 3 players, like usual, off to SEC Media Days. They'll be taking Boogie Huntley, and I think it's a great choice. We've had Boogie in here on our Garnet Trust Hour multiple times. He's phenomenal. He's just a good guy. Interesting to listen to and talk to. So I think Boogie Huntley's a great choice. Also, I mean, Debo Williams, I tell you, everything you hear about Debo is intense. So we'll see how hopefully Debo won't Terry Tate office linebacker anybody at SEC Media Days. But Debo Williams, 4th year in the program. Boogie Huntley, 5th year. Luke Doty's another one. We've had Luke in here for Garnet Trust hours, and Luke's his 5th year of the program. Another guy that's going to be just fine handling the media. All 3 will be fine handling the media. Debo Williams has done a nice job in pressers. So good choice by Shane. Look, let's just be honest here. You want to take 3 guys with you that aren't going to cause headlines. You don't need any stuff, right? You need 3 guys. They're going to represent the program and the university in a thumbs-up manner. They're going to go. They're not going to drop any F-bombs. They're not going to say anything awful. They're not going to say anything controversial. They're just going to go in there, do their thing, answer their questions, represent, and leave. That's what you want. That's what you want. That might not be what the media wants. They might want dudes in there saying all sorts of whacked out stuff because it gives you great content and something to talk about. But from the Shane Beamer perspective, you want 3 guys who've been in the program a long time, reward them for their, years and years of hard work and sweat. Take them along to SEC Media Days, let them shine and have their moments, and you know that they're going to do right by you, or do right for you, I should say. So all 3, excellent. Boogie, Luke Doty, and Debo Williams. Again, 3 guys. Debo, 4th year. Remember, he transferred in from Delaware. Boogie Huntley, Luke Doty, recruited by the previous regime, but had been here for 5 years. And with Luke Doty, I think it's so interesting that, you would sit and think, all right, this guy wants to play quarterback and start somewhere, and he's not getting that opportunity at South Carolina. He's been passed over multiple times. You would think at some point he would want to go off and play quarterback somewhere, but he settled in, started some work at wide receiver last year, more work at wide receiver this year. He's sort of like the X factor at wide receiver. We'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, Luke Doty, everybody, I would talk to Luke Doty. He loves University of South Carolina. He's a, South Carolina guy, and he didn't want to leave. Liked where he was at. And he was good. Academically, he was very happy with what was going on for him. So he's like, you know what? I'm cool here. I like my quality of life. Love the university. Love my academic track. Love playing here. I don't need to go anywhere. That's a dinosaur in today's college football. Not to say that's better than transferring. I think everything is always fluid. Everything is individual for each person. There's some guys I would say, man, you got to transfer and go play. And if you decide, no, you want to stay and spend your entire career in a spot where you're not getting a whole lot of chance to start, but you just love being at that university and playing for that coach and that football program and your teammates, and you love the area and all that, and quality of life is important. There's no right, wrong answer to it. There just isn't. Everything is for each individual. And Luke Doty's like, look, man, I dig where I'm at. And I think Doty, going back to the wide receiver piece, I really have a feeling that Luke Doty could be, I'm not saying Luke Doty's going to be Xavier Legette, but I could see Luke Doty, now that he's doing more work as a receiver, you could get more production out of Luke Doty than anybody's talking about. We were talking about Nick Harbor, all the guys that have come in through the portal, Amazio Bennett, the freshman. We talk about all these other receivers, and we're really not yapping about Doty. But if you watch Doty last year and when he got run as a wideout, he looked more natural playing the position of wide receiver to me than he ever did in the times I got to watch him play quarterback. Just didn't look natural playing the position of quarterback. And he was an athlete in high school. That's what he was always labeled. So, quarterback, again, does he have athletic skills and ability? Sure. Does he have arm talent? Yes. Can he run around because of athleticism? Absolutely. But there's a feel for the position and an instinctive feel for the position. And watching Luke Doty, to me, had more instinctive feel playing wide receiver than a quarterback. And he made some plays last year at wide receiver through the season where you went, this guy might be all right if you leave him there and don't yo-yo him, from one room to the other. So we'll see what you get from Luke Doty at wide receiver. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, Doty's got solid size, 6'1", around 215, 220. So we just, that's one thing, that hit me thinking about Luke Doty today is like, we really don't put him as much in the mix for the possibilities at wide receivers. Maybe we should. And we'll find out as this thing plays itself out. But be Doty, Debo, and Boogie going to Dallas for SEC Media Days. Other thing I thought was interesting about SEC Media Days is the calendar. Day one, you got Brian Kelly kicking this thing off from LSU. Then you get Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Hopefully he combs his hair this year. Shane goes third. And then Clark Lee at Vandy. I mean, it's solid. I mean, Brian Kelly, isn't the most, he's not like, the most charismatic cat in the world, but, he spent a lot of time in front of a mic. Lane Kiffin, hopefully Lane will give us some kooky stuff we can talk about. We'll see what Shane throws down. And God love Clark Lee. Just, man, being the head coach at Vanderbilt. Whew. Whew. Talk about that guy, that whole Greek thing with the guy that pushes the rock up the hill. Yeah, he should be wearing a Vanderbilt sweatshirt. So Clark Lee goes Monday. On Tuesday, you get Kirby Smart. You get our boy Eli from Missouri. Brent Venables, Oklahoma. And then Josh Heupel from Tennessee. And obviously, Kirby's Kirby, but you want to hear what Brent Venables has to say because the big thing about this SEC Media Days spotlight Oklahoma, Texas, new to the league. Wednesday, you get Kalen DeBoer from Alabama. Has been very media-friendly in Tuscaloosa from what I've been reading and hearing. Then you get Billy Napier. That's nap time. If you have trouble sleeping, just sit down and listen to Billy. Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby, his first time as a head coach, obviously. We'll hear what Lebby has to say. And then Steve Sarkisian from Texas will round out the Wednesday. So that's an interesting day. Now, Thursday's the last day of the shindig. And everybody's got one foot out the door. Can we just be honest? They got one foot out the door. So Thursday, the SEC has lined up Uncle Sam, and I love Sam Pittman. I do. I'd love to see Arkansas turn it around and Uncle Sam keep his gig. Because I just feel like he's dead coach walking. Just like Napier at Florida. Then you get Hugh Freeze. Then you get, the charismatic stylings of Mark Stoops from Kentucky. And then you get first-year head coach Mike Elko at A&M. Actually, first year at A&M, not a first-year head coach, but first year at A&M, Mike Elko. Now, Sam can be fun. Sam can be interesting. But then Hugh Freeze, Mark Stoops, Mike Elko, we're not pushing the personality meter real high. And that's ironically the last day of SEC Media Days. And I don't know if that was done on purpose. I don't know if Greg Sankey said, okay, Thursday's a day where everybody's halfway leaving anyway. Throw Stoops in there, and Elko, and Freeze. So that's the lineup at SEC Media Days for the coaches. And again, Shane Monday going third on the opening day. And we'll be there doing our show, doing this show noon to 3, and then the post-game show with Jane Elijah 3 to 6 from Dallas, from Media Row. And we'll have, obviously, phone-in reports during the early game and during the Extra Point and Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. So we'll be all over it in Dallas. All right, we'll get back in here as we continue on the halftime show. A couple of interesting things also going into South Carolina's SEC Media Day. Some questions brought up by Mike Uva on Gamecock Central. We are going to get to those next. And play a little piece of sound I think is interesting. Paul Feinbaum on Jocks in Birmingham talking about Lincoln Riley. We want to get to that next, too. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, David Dare hanging around as well. We go till 3 on the game. Oh, what you've been talking about and we're talking about and we're all yapping about. SEC Media Days coming up. South Carolina football, Shane Beamer will go third on Monday, as we'll be there all week, doing the shows live from noon to 6 and also updates throughout the day between 6 a.m. and noon from Dallas. Mike, you will put up something really interesting. 5 questions about South Carolina football going into SEC Media Days. None of them are shocking or, wow, I didn't think of talking about that. But there are, it's very interesting, Mike, diving into some of these topics. One was how confident is the coaching staff in Lenore Sellers being ready to take over as the starter. I think they feel about as good as you're going to, right? You're never going to know until you know, until Lenore Sellers takes the field in Lexington, Kentucky against a good Wildcat defense. You're really not going to know. Your thought process is South Carolina should handle Old Dominion. And I'm not being mean, not being cocky about it. They're just better. And so South Carolina should beat the Monarchs. And it should not be that difficult. Yes, Old Dominion, you know, they've given Virginia Tech all they can handle recently. They have, you know, scared the bleep out of some, you know, power conference teams who didn't take them seriously. But I'll be honest, coming off of 5-7, you got to take everybody seriously. I mean, that's just me. I mean, who are you to not take anybody seriously when you're trying to reestablish your momentum as a program? I'm taking everybody seriously. If I'm playing like the local Pop Warner squad, we're breaking down film, man. You got to take everybody like laser focused seriously. I'm not saying the coaching staff. Of course, coaching staffs take everybody seriously, right? They put up film of every team. They cut up everything good a terrible team does. Yeah, they might have lost their last 47 straight, but they're the best team I've ever seen on a 47-game losing streak. Look at some of the stuff these guys do well. So I'm not saying coaching staff. I'm saying players. You're a player, you better be preparing for this game like, you know, you're rolling into the SEC championship game. You got to be focused. We went 5-7 last year. You got to take everybody seriously. You got to prepare for everybody like you're preparing for Georgia. So hopefully you handle Old Dominion the way you should. And then your first true test is Lexington, Kentucky for Lenore Sellers against a Kentucky defense that's always solid. All right, what has South Carolina done to improve this offensive line? And you just added a bunch of depth. And you're hoping the youngins last year who had to get thrown in the fire when they weren't ready, they're now more prepared for their second year, like Tree or Baugh. And you're hoping veterans. Rashawn Lee was having a nice, solid year when he was healthy. And then, you know, Ja'Kai Moore, you'd like to see him take a step forward late in his career. Then you have Kamar Bell, who a lot of people like, and Torricelli Simpkins, who also is kind of an under the radar type of talent that NFL people think highly of. So you've added a lot of offensive line depth to go to your returning players, your veterans, you know, your freshmen from last year. You've added Josiah Thompson, a 5-star freshman. You've added a couple other highly thought of offensive linemen as well. You got a ton of guys is what I'm saying. The thought process is this. You should be able to put together a solid offensive line. I'm not talking about something that's going to be carrying around a Joe Moore Award, but just a solid offensive line that will give you the time to throw and the holes to run through. 3, who replaced Xavier Legette at wide receiver? My answer is simple. Nobody. There's nobody. And look, nobody expected Xavier Legette to do what Xavier Legette did last year. Everybody thought Juice Wells would do what Xavier Legette did last year. And could one of these wideouts come out of nowhere and put up big numbers? Yeah. But again, it's not every day a guy goes from off the radar to a first-round pick in the NFL draft. It just doesn't happen a lot. So I don't know if any of these guys are going to do that, but I think you can get depth of production. I'll put it that way. I think a lot of these guys can do some things to help you win, and I don't know if anybody's numbers are going to make you go, wow, but when you add it together, I think you can you can have a nice passing attack with a variety of guys doing a variety of things. What can playing the 3-3-5 on defense more mean for South Carolina? I just remember what we saw last year. Once this team played more 3-3-5 in November, and yes, I get it, they weren't going up against the greatest offenses in America, but still, South Carolina played that 3-3-5. That defense was much better. And a lot of what you do in life is confidence, right? From the neck up. That defense gained a lot of confidence in November by playing as well as they did. And hopefully that translates to 2024, and that translates to seeing more of this 3-3-5 get mixed in. We'll see. But yes, I think what it did for this defense last year from a confidence level was huge. And number 5, what does a successful season look like in year 4 of the Shane Beamer era? I mean, Shane right now is what, 20-18 as a head coach. Bit over 500 for 4 years. I think this year, if you get back to a bowl game, I know that's not a high bar. I think after what happened to you last season, get back to a bowl game and be competitive against the upper level teams. And if you can win more than 6, great. If you can pull 7 out of this season, where people are looking at you as one of the 4 or 5 worst teams in the conference because of all your question marks on offense. If you could go from that to a 7-win season, that'd be phenomenal. But if you can at least pull 6 W's and get yourself back to a bowl game, I think that's steering the ship back in the right direction. That's just me. That's the 5 questions Mike Yuva has on Gamecock Central. All right, Paul Feinbaum on Jocks in Birmingham was talking about Lincoln Riley and his reputation and his staying power at Southern Cal. Hit it, Dave. Listen to that Feinbaum.
I don't think Lincoln Riley has a path back. And what we all sensed on Monday out there was real. This wasn't just the beat up the coach. I mean, listen, we all lived through that 20 years ago at Alabama when Dennis Franchione left. But this was even more stark because Lincoln Riley was popular. I mean, he was beloved by Oklahoma people. He had taken the program to 3 playoffs and a couple of Heisman Trophy winners, and he just clearly tucked and ran. And in the parlance of college sports, as both of you know, running away from something is probably the worst look, and that's how they feel about him. And this is an incredibly proud program that has been at the pinnacle of the sport for 100 years. And it's not a matter of wishing him bad luck out there. That's already happening. And if you look at the reality, the number of players that are bailing on Lincoln Riley in Southern California is startling. I've always thought he was a really good coach, especially on the offensive side. But I don't think anybody today views him in that same realm. And quite frankly, I think he'll be out of Southern Cal at the end of the season. I don't. It's a matter of whether it crashes and burns, or whether he just decides he's got to seek elsewhere. But I don't think there's any way he is going to be successful out there. I think that train has pulled out of the station. And if indeed that happens, this is one of the most historic crash and burns in the history of modern college football. Because 5 years ago, Lincoln Riley was literally considered among the top 3 or 4 coaches in the country. Every time the Cowboys job came around, everybody feared he would leave. But he made a disastrous decision, I think, in the end.
Interesting. We'll come back and discuss Paul Feinbaum's thoughts on Lincoln Riley. I get where Paul Feinbaum's going to a point, because I've said this about Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley showed you at Oklahoma he could take a really good program and keep it really good, because that's what Bob Stoops gave him, a really good program. But Lincoln Riley has never built a program in his life. And at Southern Cal, they needed somebody to build the program back to being what it used to be, and there was no evidence Lincoln Riley could do that. And so far, I mean, the first year, double-digit wins, and if you beat Utah, you're in the college football playoff. Last year, things kind of went off the rails because the defense was so historically god-awful. But there was no evidence that Lincoln Riley could go to, L.A. and build a program. But some of the other stuff, Paul Feinbaum said, let's investigate on the other side. Also, our Firehouse sub text the hour at 803-404-6100. Halftime show, Terry Ford, our buddy David Dare helping us out here on the game. I'll get to our Firehouse sub text the hour. Just a second. Just a second. Terry Ford, David Dare hanging out with you on the game. And if you're with us in Columbia, Florence, Myrtle Beach, thanks a lot for hanging out on the Game Network. If you're listening on the 107.5 The Game app, you got off of Google Play or iTunes, thank you. Or if you're checking us out on the Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. Thank you very much. No matter how you're, hanging out with us, we thank you. All right, we're going to get to our Firehouse Subtext the hour in a sec. First, I want to finish up this Lincoln Riley thought. And what Paul Feinbaum said about Lincoln Riley, that this will be his last year at Southern Cal, and his reputation has been tarnished, and he ran away from Oklahoma. Look, we can all agree to disagree on everything in life, right? I look at this. Lincoln Riley obviously was ridiculously successful in Norman. Bob Stoops had 2 11-2 seasons, then retired, handed the keys to Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley went 12-2 his first 3 years, 9-2, then 10-2. All 5 years finishing in the top 10 in the country. Multiple trips to the college football playoff. He didn't run from Norman, Oklahoma. What he did is he ran to the cash in Southern Cal. He was making around roughly 7.5 in Norman, Oklahoma, $7.5 million. Now he's making 10 at Southern Cal. Now again, I don't have my phone calculator. Dave, you can back me up. I think 10's greater than 7. Am I right, Dave?
Depends on which universe you're in, which dimension.
So if I gave you the choice of having $7 million or $10 million, which one are you taking?
What's the catch?
So Lincoln Riley got offered more dough at Southern Cal. He got $20 million in total compensation his first year, according to this thing in front of me called the Internet. He didn't sneak out of Norman, Oklahoma running from something. He snuck out of Norman, Oklahoma for a job to pay him a lot more money. Now, how he left, was that crap? Yeah. He could have handled that better, Lincoln Riley, and even Lincoln Riley today admits to that. But I don't think he snuck out of town running from something. He snuck out of town to take more money. And maybe, just maybe, and I'm just, throwing something against the wall and see if it sticks and smells. Maybe Lincoln Riley said, you know what? As good as I've got it at the University of Oklahoma, this is not my program. This is Bob Stoops' program, Barry Switzer's program, Chuck Fairbanks' program, Bud Wilkinson's program. I'm just the next caretaker of the great Oklahoma football program. But if I go to Southern Cal and resurrect the Southern Cal football program, now I'm showing you something. The great Clay Helton isn't handing me anything. I'm going to go there and build my legacy by rebuilding the great Southern Cal football program with this fertile recruiting base they call California. And then I'll be looked at on the same level as the John McKays and the John Robinsons and the Pete Carrolls. But I'll be the guy that resuscitates Southern Cal football. Now, it could be none of that, right? It just might be as simple as this. Man, that's a lot of money. It's more money than I'm making now. Screw it. Let's go. Come on, baby. We're going to L.A. Get some shorts. But if we want to try to go to some psychological level of why do you leave Norman, Oklahoma, maybe that's why. Maybe you're the guy that can bring back Trojan football to what it was at the heights of Carroll and Robinson and McKay. Or you're just going to get a lot more money. I don't know. But anyway, so I don't think Lincoln Riley gets let go at the end of this year. I don't. Look, last year Southern Cal went 8-5. Their defense was abysmal. It was the worst year Lincoln Riley's ever has a head coach. I will go back to my question I have. Can Lincoln Riley build a program? There's no evidence of that. He might not be able to. We'll find out. But his first year at Southern Cal, he was 11-3, 8-1 in conference. And if Southern Cal beats Utah, they're playing in the college football playoffs. So I'm going to slow my roll on Lincoln Riley's this or Lincoln Riley's that, or he's getting fired or this, that, and the other. I just don't think that's the way this thing's going at this time. But it will be interesting to watch Lincoln Riley at Southern Cal. Still, I don't know if he can build a program or not. All right, Firehouse Sub, text the hour, 803-404-6100. Texter, watch out for that Luke Doty at wide receiver, fellas. He's going to surprise everyone with how good he is. And like we talked about earlier, he might. He looked natural catching the football last year when he did get, snaps at wide out. And now he's going to do more work. He's a good athlete, got good size. What do we say, 6'1", 215, 220. With more reps and more grind in the wide receiver room, who knows what Luke Doty can be? We yapped about it earlier this hour. Maybe, just maybe, he's the guy we need to talk more about when we're trying to figure out the wide receiver position. Appreciate the text. Totally see where you're going. Firehouse Sub text the hour, 803-446-100. We'll fire more up next hour. It's football coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. It's Terry Ford. Appreciate you hanging out as we go to 3 on the game. Eight zero 875-MENS. That's the number for the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Look, you get older, we're guys. Things that used to be easy and natural just aren't anymore. Whether it's how much weight you lift at the gym, maybe your running time, maybe, just your recovery from workout, your sleep, your memory, your driving life, the bedroom, the living room, wherever. Things are off. It could just be low testosterone. That could be it. Well, how do I fix that, Tara? Again, 803-875-MENS. Call the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Set up a free confidential consultation with Dr. Dan and the staff. You go in, tell them your personalized story. They might think it's low testosterone. They'll do some lab work. If it is low T, they'll put you on a personalized program specifically set up for you to make you feel like you again. Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Make that call. Get yourself back to being right. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on the game. Terry Ford, thank you for hanging out. We appreciate you. Get you caught up on some news with Carolina football. If you haven't heard, Gamecocks have filled the vacant position of basically what is a GM in today's college football world. The Director of Player Personnel, Darren Usher, graduated from USC back in, let me look it up here, back in 2009. Has an interesting resume when it comes to this type of gig. He was the personnel and recruiting director at Oregon. Or I should say he served in a personnel and recruiting role at Oregon. Let's get it right. 2023, Usher helped construct, 2024, I should say, helped construct a recruiting class for this upcoming year that has been ranked as high as number 3 nationally. Obviously, Oregon has been good. 2023, Ducks went 12-2, just could not beat UW. He then left to go to UCLA to become the executive director for recruiting for the 2024 campaign. That didn't last long because Chip Kelly was like, hey, welcome aboard. We'd love to have you. Coach, you got suitcases. Where are you going? Yeah, I'm taking a job at Ohio State. So Usher then left UCLA because, well, he didn't have a gig anymore and went back to Oregon where he was hanging out with the Duck program. Usher also spent 2 seasons, 2021-2022, in the SEC as Auburn's director of football recruiting. He oversaw all areas of recruiting, player personnel, roster management. Also served as football's liaison with the compliance department. Usher helped produce a pair of top 25 recruiting classes on the Plains. Before Auburn, Usher spent 7 years at Boise State, was the Broncos football operations / recruiting coordinator for 2 years before being promoted to director of football recruiting and player personnel. And Boise State was very good during that time. Number 1 recruiting classes in the Mountain West each of his 7 years on staff. Boise State averaged roughly 10 wins a year. So then basically it was Boise State to Auburn, to Oregon, briefly to UCLA, back to Oregon where Usher was just kind of hanging out waiting for something to happen while he was still doing some stuff for Oregon. And then he left the Ducks to come to South Carolina. So like I said in the beginning of the show, for losing this position in the manner you did and finding someone with this resume that Darren Usher has, because Usher also kind of thought he had a gig and then all of a sudden he didn't, and he was kind of like out there twisting. So like I said in the opening riff of the show, sometimes timing is everything. Darren Usher coming back to his alma mater to take over to be Shane Beamer's director of player personnel and recruiting. Speaking of recruiting, South Carolina commit Jaquel Holman, linebacker, has been moved up from 3-star prospect status to 4-star. Looking at On3's rankings, Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power, has moved up Holman to a 4-star now. Holman is a top 250 rated prospect, number 21 linebacker in the 2025 class, number 5 prospect in the state of South Carolina. So that's good. The star ranking of Jaquel Holman goes up from 3-star to 4-star. I mean, light guy, weighs about 200 pounds, also plays running back in high school. You figure he's going to be hitting the weight room, the training table, put some weight on him, make him stronger, and we'll see what kind of player South Carolina gets out of Holman. But that's the latest recruiting news, Holman going from 3-star to 4-star. Now, I know some of the dudes on the game here today talked about Athlon Sports, or 2024 SEC All-Conference team, is in the preseason magazine. The story popped out that South Carolina has 3 defensive players on the SEC second team, no one on first team All-SEC. Now, again, does that tell you something? Yeah, it does, obviously. Does it mean everything? No. But at some point, you'd like to have your program to where you got some dudes who are first team All-SEC. Three on the second team, though. All on the defensive side of the ball. Defensive lineman Tonka Hemingway. Linebacker Debo Williams, or like they say in the article here, Dabo Williams. And safety Nick Amenwari, all are second team. So Debo, Nick, and Tonka all second team. Rocket Sanders named third team. Rashawn Lee, offensive lineman. Punter Kai Kroger were on the fourth team. So that's kind of where that whole thing's at. Now, again, we know all these preseason teams are for what they're worth. It's talking season, man. So we will do more talking next week when we get the media voting on the All SEC at SEC Media Days. And we know that Rocket Sanders, if healthy, is one of the best backs in the SEC. He's just got to be healthy. So he's sitting at third team. We know Kai Kroger didn't have the year he had in previous seasons. So he's fourth team punter. Rashawn Lee, when healthy, was really solid last year at center and right tackle. And the guys on defense, again, Debo Williams flies around the field, wanting to hit people like they stole something from him. Massive intensity. Hopefully, he can take all that massive intensity and athleticism, and this year again, some of the at the second decision making, gap integrity, certain things about playing the defense that Debo Williams can, maybe step up a level with his athleticism and intensity. And when Debo guesses right, sometimes he makes some really nice big plays, havoc plays, tackles for loss. We hope all of that gets better in Debo's final year. Tonka Hemingway, part of that, rotation, a tweener, but a guy, again, he's athletic and used in the right way. Tonka Hemingway can make some plays for you. There's no doubt. No doubt about it at all. And we've talked a ton about Nick Amenwari here lately. And even Wari just got to get better in coverage. Playing the run, Nick's specialty. Knocking the snot out of people, Nick's specialty. Just the coverage skills just got to get better. But three guys, second team All SEC, all on the defensive side of the ball. The feeling is defensively, after what we saw in November, and I always have to couch it and say, yes, we get it. You weren't playing against offensive juggernauts, but still, you shut down the teams you played, and your defense much better than what you saw in September and October. You got so many guys coming back on D. You've added depth through the portal. You've added some youngins through high school recruiting, like a 5-star edge rusher in Dylan Stewart, who looked really good in the spring game. All these things make you feel like this defense is going to be good. Or let me rephrase it. This defense should be good. Your weaknesses, to me, there was two major weaknesses. Edge pass rush, you feel like you filled that with Stewart, Kyle Kennard, the transfer coming in from Georgia Tech. Also maybe, Des Yu, Brian Thomas, those guys, develop and get better from last year. The other one is, what are you going to do about nickel coverage? Are you going to continue with Kilgore covering the slot? Are you going to use one of your corners who don't win the corner gig opposite of O'Donnell Fortune? Let's say Vakari Swain loses out to Judge Collier. Will you use Vakari Swain more in obvious pass situations in the slot? Or will you continue with Kilgore? That's really the biggest question mark. I think the edge is going to be fine. I think Kennard he showed you at Georgia Tech, he can get to the quarterback. Dylan Stewart, look, nobody's thinking you're going to get Clowney 2.0, but Dylan Stewart should help you with your pass rush as well. You've added depth at linebacker. The linebacker room is the best linebacker room I've seen in my 3 years here in Columbia. I think this defense should be good in 2024. Athlon Sports has 3 defenders on the All-SEC second team. So I find that quite interesting. And we'll see, because I think this defense is going to have to, at least in the short term in September, kind of lead the way, because this offense with so many question marks, it might need a little bit of time to gel. Might need a little bit of time to get themselves together. You got, a brand new shiny quarterback, New toys at running back and wide receiver, trying to figure out your offensive line with all the possibilities and combinations you got there. So the defense might have to hold the fort early in the year while the offense kind of, gets their bearings. We'll see. All right, football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Craft and Draft, Divine Street, Friday, 3 to 6. Post-game show will be there with Jay and Elijah. Also, one of our 12 craft beer locations is Craft and Draft. And that reminds me to tell you about our craft beer passport. We only have a few of these left. And I'm not saying that just to get rid of them. I'm serious. I was told today we only got a few of these left. $360 worth of craft beer yumminess for $79. Well, Tara, that's a deal. How do I get that? Very easy. You go to 1075thegame.com. You click on Sweet Deals. You look through the list of all the cool sweet deals. You see Craft Beer Passport. You click there. Boom, you got it. $360 worth of craft beer for $79. We're almost out of our craft beer passports. Don't miss out. Go snag one now. Again, 1075thegame.com. Click on Sweet Deals. And one of our locations will be out on Friday. Post-game show with Jay and Elijah at Craft and Draft on Divine in Columbia. Come on out, say hey, knock down a craft beer, grab a passport. We'll get back in here. It's football in the 1 o'clock hour. Kennington Smith from The Athletic talking to Paul Feinbaum. We'll hear what Kennington Smith has to say. Also, Chris Lowe from ESPN, his thoughts on Oklahoma, Texas, the SEC. All that's coming up in football in the 1 o'clock hour right here on the halftime show on The Game. We keep rolling. Football, the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on the game. Terry Ford switched over. I forgot to turn the video camera. Oh, man. So you get to look at the nice empty studio for a second. I was like, I knew I forgot something. On the game TV, as I was switching over temporarily, going to hang in the producer studio, then I'm going to pop back over to the host studio, and Elijah Campbell will come in and start producing a little early for us here on the halftime show on the game. Anyway, football in the 1 o'clock hour, again, like always, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. All right, so Kennington Smith from The Athletic was on with Paul Feinbaum, talking about a multitude of things in college football. First of all, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I was driving back here on Sunday night, flipping around the old Sirius XM, landed on the college sports channel, 84, and they had someone who covers Alabama football yapping about Kalen DeBoer. I mean, just how much, it's so different. He's so much more personable with the media, and, he lets the assistants talk, and they're out on the practice field, and they're having fun, and if somebody screws up, not only the players, but the coaches are doing push-ups too. Oh, my gosh, golly, this is so cool. And it all might be. And it is different from the business-like approach of Nick Saban. And maybe in this new world we're entering in college athletics, you're going to need coaches more like Kalen DeBoer, and maybe the style of coach that Nick Saban was. Those kind of coaches have to evolve, or they don't coach anymore. But we said this yesterday. I get it, man. And the media's like this. And I've been doing this for a long time, since the 1800s. The media, when you are media friendly as a coach, man, the media kisses your butt. They do. They love it because you make their job easier. They love you. They give you all sorts of leeway because they want you to succeed so bad. And they'll even, some of them, not all of them, but some of them will even start, trying to, if you're struggling, make excuses for you because they don't want you to get canned because the next guy might not be as media friendly. So, yeah, Kalen DeBoer kind of being much more media friendly than Nick, and giving more access to the assistant coaches and, kind of doing things in a media-friendly, more fashion. Obviously, the folks that cover the team are going, this is awesome. And it is, till you take the field. And look, Kalen DeBoer, like we said, has been successful in every stop as a college football coach. The guy has. It's a phenomenal record. But, he hasn't won a national championship. He played for one. But I'll take the business-like approach guy who sometimes had that look on his face that, he ate a bad chalupa. And those, multiple national championship trophies. I'll take that guy. Because myself, I think the winning is fun. We'll see what Kalen DeBoer does at Alabama. I give him props. He could have stayed at Washington. Would have made less money, but they loved him. They loved him in Seattle. Huskies played for a national championship. He didn't have to leave. He could have sat up there in the Pacific Northwest and rolled and collected a decent living, and now he decided to take on the challenge of being the guy to replace the guy. All right, here's Kennington Smith from The Athletic talking about Caleb DeBoer and the momentum that DeBoer and his staff are building in the offseason.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I feel like where I'm landing on this is the emphasis on the relationship aspect for Kalen DeBoer. When he was first hired, that first day that he got to Tuscaloosa, he sat down with every player that he could on the team, leaders on the team. He had a pen and paper, and he was writing things down about every single player that he met, everything that was important to them about the tradition of the program, what they wanted to retain. And he's kind of taken that and has continued to build those relationships with the players. And that's why you see a player like a Caden Proctor, who is at Iowa, keeping in touch with his teammates, and they're letting him know that they like it. They like it with under DeBoer. They're not going to leave after spring. They're going to stay and ride it out. He decides to come back. And then you see it on the recruiting trail as well. Players are coming to campus, and they're seeing with their eyes like the same Alabama culture in a way, a lot of retainees on the off-field staff, and they're still seeing that tradition there, and they're still feeling that same energy, but it's a little bit more personable. It's a little bit more fun, I think. He's kind of created a different type of atmosphere, and it is going to take some getting used to, but I think you're kind of seeing a bit of a melting pot of a culture here that's all kind of centered on DeBoer focusing on the people aspect and letting the football take care of itself.
Now, feels like the right way to go. Correct? Yeah. I mean, it does. I mean, you got to be you. You can't be Nick Saban 2.0. You can't be Nick Jr. You can't do things like Nick. You got to be you. And I think Kalen DeBoer is being himself, who he is. But what he's doing that's smart, first of all, Nick is around. I mean, if we get like $500,000 as a consultant. I mean, he's being very smart in embracing Nick Saban. And Saban's going to stay out of his way. That's just, Nick Saban's not going to sit around and go, Kalen, I was watching practice today. Let me tell you, I do a couple things. He's not doing that. But DeBoer has embraced Saban. He's obviously embraced everything that is a tradition of Alabama football while bringing his own personality to it. And I've always thought that's what you got to do. One of the biggest failures, I think, of most of like Bill Belichick's assistants is they moved on to be head coaches and they tried to be Bill Belichick. You got to be you. You just do. What works for Bill Belichick isn't going to work for everybody. Not showering for a couple of weeks and wearing the same hoodie doesn't work for every coach. But Bill Belichick, arguably the greatest coach in the history of the NFL, it worked for him. And I'd hire Bill Belichick tomorrow. I would. And see, has he truly evolved in ways he might have to in the new world we live in coaching? But, Kalen DeBoer has done this the right way. It feels like hug the traditions, be all on board of the great coach you replaced, but just be yourself. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, DeBoer hadn't won a game yet at Alabama. All right, also, Kennington Smith was discussing Jalen Milroe, the Tide quarterback who went from struggling in September to having a heck of a year. Here is Smith talking about the development of Jalen Milroe at quarterback for Bama.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is just a more well-rounded attack built around Jalen Milroe. I think for large stretches last year, the offense wasn't completely tailored to what Jalen Milroe's strengths are. Some of that had to do with how they needed to play in order to win. But I think when you're talking about the question marks of what it's going to take or what it's going to look like in this offense, it's definitely fair. I think when you look at Washington's offense last year, most people would say that it was just a strictly vertical passing team. But a lot of what Michael Penix did last year was in that, short intermediate part, making snap decisions, processing things quickly, which was not really a huge function of Alabama's offense last year. So it is going to be an adjustment for Jalen Milroe. I do think the vertical passing game is going to be a huge part of it, but him kind of adjusting to maybe a new style and what's going to be expected of him is another leading storyline as well. I do think, though, if there is a silver lining to what I'm saying, is that I do think there is something about having an offensive brain trust that is all in on their best player and willing to build a system around him. Like I said, last year that wasn't necessarily the case all the way through. Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan have been steadfast from day one that Jalen Milroe is the guy at quarterback, and they're kind of building things around him. So that confidence that they have in him, I think is something that he's going to be able to kind of internalize and take going into this year. So it might not look like the same Washington offense from a year ago, but I do expect Jalen Milroe to be pretty dynamic in the offense.
Build the offense around the strength of the quarterback. What a concept. But no, I mean, you have to. I mean, Jalen Milroe last year at Alabama, what he did really well was throw the deep ball and then take off and run. In the intermediate and short areas, Milroe struggled with consistency, but he could throw a really good deep ball and he could do stuff with his legs. But to be fair, you just heard what Kennington Smith said. How developed was the Alabama offense last year? Could, with a new offense and a new offensive coordinator, new quarterback coach, just a whole new scheme and another year of experience, could Jalen Milroe get better throwing in the intermediate and short areas? Absolutely. But last year, that was a struggle. But from everything that we hear, this offense is going to be truly tailored to the gifts of Jalen Milroe. And we'll see. All right, football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors here on The Game. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging. We'll come back. Chris Lowe of ESPN talking about Texas and Oklahoma going into the SEC. Are they ready to rumble in the best conference in America? And what are their biggest hurdles? We'll get to that. And also, Joe Klatt from Fox Sports talking with Matt Rule, the head coach of Nebraska, about parity. All that's coming up in the 1 o'clock hours. We yap nothing but football here on the halftime show in the game. What you're talking about, what we're talking about, obviously, it's talking season. SEC Media Days coming up, starting Monday in Dallas, and we're starting yapping about Texas, Oklahoma coming into the SEC. That's a big story at SEC Media Days. Chris Lowe from ESPN was talking about this huge topic of conversation, Texas and Oklahoma. And first of all, Lowe started off with, what's the biggest hurdle for these two programs coming into the best conference in America?
Well, it's the same thing both coaches told me in their mind, the biggest hurdle when I visited with them this spring. And that's the grind of the league, and being able to build, in November, late October, playing at a level with players that maybe haven't played as much, stepping in bigger roles. I mean, having played in that league and covered it, that it's not your first 22, man. It's your first 35 or 40. And when you get into the latter part of the season, guys go down, guys are not 100%. You got to have guys that maybe haven't played as much, that you've recruited at a high level and developed to come through for you. And I think when you're playing the schedule you play in the SEC week in, week out, that's never more glaring to be able to have that kind of quality and depth across the board.
That's the point what Chris Lowe brings up we've been yapping about here the last week. We've really started to focus on this thing. A lot of quote-unquote experts and pundits, and they just have Texas, playing for the SEC championship. Because what they did last year, they got the college football playoff. Hey, good for Texas. Hey, happy for you. Big 12 last year was a good, deep league. A lot of solid to average to above average to pretty good to good teams. It was an interesting journey through the Big 12 last year. But even in a league that was deep with solid to pretty good to good teams, it's not the SEC every week. Just not. And you're going to deal with the physical pounding of playing in the best conference in America week in, week out. Look, Texas's schedule is nowhere near as tough as Oklahoma's. I don't know what the schedule gods, I don't know what Oklahoma did to them. But Texas, not that tough. But still, to think they're just going to waltz right into the SEC and cook off 11-1, I don't know about that. I think 9-3 is much more believable for Texas. They got a lot of talent. What Steve Sarkisian did last year, give him a ton of props. You just do. But to think that Texas is just going to kick themselves into the SEC and go 11-1 and play for the conference championship and land in the college football playoff, we'll see. Could they do it? Yeah, sure they could. I just don't think that's what's going to happen. And with Oklahoma, I think both teams, they're going to get mulligans. They just are. You're transitioning into the Southeastern Conference. Only the most over-the-top crazies in your fan base are going to expect you to go in there and tear up the league. There's an adjustment period. There just is. And I think both programs will have that adjustment period this upcoming season. It's the season after, especially at Oklahoma. Let's say the Sooners, the over-under, were they 7.5 over-under? Let's say they win 8 games. Fan base will go, all right, first year in the SEC, I get you. But what do you do the following year? That's going to be the key. And say they were Texas. Let's say they went 9-3. So, Longhorn fans, even though Texas can be a bit arrogant, most Longhorn fans will go, look, it's first year in the SEC. We understand. But it's that following year. What are you doing? And in the losses you have, are you competitive or are you getting boat raced? I think both teams are going to need that year of adjustment. All right, Chris Lowe also talking about Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC. Are they prepared for the Southeastern Conference? Forget on the field. How about off the field?
Well, one of the first things you saw this offseason is Oklahoma took Brent's contract up considerably. And I think, without question, too, the staff. And he's been able to sort of tweak his staff a little bit over the last year or so and keep key guys. And the same for Clark. I mean, listen, when you start talking about resources and facilities and all the things off the field, NIL certainly is probably the biggest component now. Both these schools are in good shape. I mean, it's not like they're stepping in and it's going to be a whole nother level they need to get to when it comes to intangibles and off-the-field things. They're ready to go from that standpoint and have been for a long time. So I don't think any of those things are going to be a factor. Again, I think it gets down to handling those schedules.
Yeah, I mean, off the field, Oklahoma and Texas, they got resources. They got NIL. In Texas, the money they have at the University of Texas is just vile. And Oklahoma's got a ton of it too. So they're going to be just fine. They're not going to be like the Tampa Rays of the SEC, either one of them. They've got the resources to compete. It's just I think you'd have a year of adjustment. And I don't know if Brent Venables is the guy at Oklahoma. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, 10 wins last year, that was great. But you were in the position to possibly play for the to get into the college football playoff. Then you lost 2 winnable games in Stillwater and in Lawrence, Kansas. You lost the last Bedlam game to a team that you were better than on paper at Oklahoma State. Now, the game was in Stillwater, but look, you're Oklahoma. And you've smacked little brother a lot. You've wedged little brother on the fence many times, and you should have last year. You didn't. I mean, you beat Texas in the State Fair game, but then you stubbed your toes a couple times. This year, I think Oklahoma's going to need a year to get ramped up. New quarterback in Jackson Arnold. Got to fix some offensive line stuff. So, Oklahoma, you feel like about eight wins feels right. They might be able to pop 9. But I just think both teams are going to need a year of transition because you're coming to, once again, the best football conference in America. All right, we're continuing football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Matt Rule was on with Joe Klatt, who does a podcast, of course, Klatt working for Fox Sports. And here's what Rule said to Joel Klatt about the parity in today's college football.
I'd say no doubt. I think you even look at like the top schools and where they're recruiting from and how it's changed over the last 10 years, where it was very regional before. Now you're recruiting nationally because you want to build a relationship. Maybe you get them then. Maybe when they go in the portal in 2 years, you get them then. And so you do have access to a lot more players. You do have players, and I think as we move into the next era, whether it's revenue sharing or how it works, people are not going to have to just decide how much they want Joel Klatt. They're going to have to decide how much they want to pay Joel Klatt. Yeah. And so, the young man's going to look at an opportunity. Well, I can go there for, $20,000. I can go there for $70,000. And so, really roster makeup and the decisions you make with, if it's a similar pot, it's going to be really, really interesting. And it does open up access, and it does bring about parity. The NFL is the most parity-driven league that there is. And so, I think all that's going to give a lot of people opportunities. And I think the one thing that I always think about, and kind of what I said earlier about playing a 17-game season, is there's more access now to the college football playoff. It's not as much about getting to the college football playoff. I mean, it is for us right now. I'm saying for the teams that have been there, it's about building a team that can win it, that can get hot and win at the end of the year, that has enough depth, that has playmakers that are healthy at the end of the year. So roster makeup is going to be more important now, in my opinion, than ever before. And we're trying to take our experience from the NFL and try to take that to college and hope that it works.
Matt Rule, Nebraska was in position to get to a bowl game last year. They had some trouble at the end of the year. Matt Rule will win in Lincoln. Matt Rule's a heck of a college football coach. In the NFL, it didn't really work out well. How much of that was Matt Rule and how much of that was he was the head coach of the massively dysfunctional, horribly owned Carolina Panthers? I don't know. But Matt Rule, look what he did at Temple. Look what he did at Baylor. He's going to win at Nebraska. Is he going to, compete for national titles? My guess would be probably not. Because, again, the recruiting pitch, come to Lincoln, Nebraska, be part of the great tradition of Nebraska football, freeze your tail off. I don't know. But I think Matt Rule will win. You know, I think Nebraska football will go back to being a good football program that goes to bowl games. You know, they'll pull an upset off every now and then. I just don't think they're going to ever get back to what they were under Tom Osborne or Bob Devaney. I could be totally wrong. Because, again, Matt Rule is, I mean, you won at Temple, man. And you won at a high level at Temple. Whew, that's tough. That's tough. But the thing about the parity, yeah, I think there was going to be more parity to a point. I mean, the college football playoff is going to be obviously 12 teams. A group of 5 squad will get in. You got some more at-large bids, obviously. But I think what Matt Rule said was interesting was now you're building a team, the Blue Bloods, the regulars who are fighting to go to the college football playoff, they're now looking not just to get in and be one of the 12, but they're looking to do damage. And I think there is going to be more parity because you have more opportunity to get to the college football playoff. But I don't think college football will ever be like the NFL. The model is more built to Major League Baseball than built to the NFL. All right, one other cut as we talk football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Oh, how about some Eli Drinkwitz? Missouri head football coach talks about his program being active in the portal.
You know, once you've identified what your roster is coming out of spring, how do you reinforce your strength? How do you reinforce your strengths, and how do you figure out how to strengthen your weaknesses, right? And obviously there is going to be another portal coming up, and we will be active in that portal time. We're under scholarship, so we're not at a full 85. So we'll be active, and you know, number one core value of University of Missouri football is always compete. The day we quit competing is the day we've accepted mediocrity. We will never do that as long as I'm the head football coach. Every single player knows every day you got to be better today than you were yesterday. I don't see any just glaring weaknesses on our roster, but I always see opportunities for us to improve.
We'll see. Can you build off a double-digit win season? You've got NIL dough, so we'll see where it goes with little Eli this year at Missouri. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Firehouse Sub Text the Hour is coming up next on the halftime show here on The Game. Time to check our Firehouse sub text the hour, 803-446-100. Texter says, as great as the Nick Saban era was, I've already forgotten about him. Football's like the Game of Thrones. You can get rid of major characters and the show is still exciting and goes on. Really more intrigued with what this new guy does at Bama than I would be with Saban dominating for another year. I mean, the storyline is more compelling and more interesting. I didn't watch Game of Thrones. By the time I started hearing what was going on, it was like, I was into it already, like the first season, and I just, it's kind of show that you have to watch from the beginning and know what the hell's going on, right? So I just never got to it. I'll take your word for it, Texter. But yeah, I mean, look, it is more interesting and compelling. What's Kalen DeBoer going to do at Bama? Because, I mean, Nick, you knew what you were getting with Alabama. They were going to win double-digit games. They were going to be in contention to win the SEC and go to the college football playoff and possibly win a national title. That was Nick Saban's Alabama. We knew it. And after a while, you're like, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. Wash, rinse, repeat. Because Saban was so good. Now you have a huge unknown and a big, gigantic question mark with DeBoer. He's doing things differently, his way, which he should. We heard cut a little while ago from Kennington Smith of The Athletic saying it's different, it's more personable. Saban was more businesslike. Half the time he looked like he had to go to the bathroom real bad. DeBoer is much more, media friendly. We'll see what happens. It's going to be, yes, very interesting to watch it play out in Tuscaloosa this year. Now, obviously, Kalen DeBoer, no pressure or expectation level at all, right? But thank you for the text. We appreciate it. We'll see where it ends up with Kalen DeBoer. But we were talking about this yesterday. I think that Lane Kiffin's got more pressure on him at Ole Miss. I know it sounds a little weird. But again, DeBoer, you got to win. You're following what I think is the greatest college football coach of all time. But most sane people understand that you're just not going to jump in and keep doing what Nick did. If you do, great. But most folks are going to expect, you need a year to get your butt comfortable in your seat. Now again, if you go 8-4, that's not acceptable. But if you're sniffing around the college football, let's say make the college football playoff. You go 10-2, make the college football playoff. Say you win a game, then you get beat, whatever. Fan base is going to go, all right, for your first year, that's okay. But hey, Kalen, we expect to win those national championships. You know that, right? I think Lane Kiffin, everything has been built for this year for Ole Miss. The Grove Collective, their NIL collective, is really good. They brought in a ton of talent that typically would never have come to Oxford, Mississippi. Kiffin's very creative on offense. He's got a veteran quarterback in Jackson Dart, who, by the way, plays really well against bad teams and bad defenses, but has had some issues against good teams and good defenses. That obviously has to change if you want to go to the next level as an offense and a program. But Lane Kiffin's got pressure. I mean, double-digit wins 2 of the last 3 years. Should have been double-digit wins 3 straight years. But it wasn't. It was close. The whole world thinks Ole Miss is going to take the next step. Compete for the SEC championship, even though probably lose it to Georgia. But definitely make the college football playoff. We were talking about yesterday. There hasn't been this much expectation level at Ole Miss since probably Archie Manning was the quarterback. And in the modern era of college football as we see it today, Ole Miss has never been looked at like this. Ever. So Lane's got a ton of pressure on himself. It's the first time in a long time Lane has expectations and pressure like knocking on the door of his house. We'll see. I just think he has more pressure this year than Kalen DeBoer. DeBoer overall will have more pressure because it's Bama. But I think for this single season in 2024, Lane Kiffin's got a ton of heat on him and that program. With all the money invested and all the things that have been done, everything has been leading to a breakout season at the Grove. We'll see. We shall see. But appreciate the text, and we'll do one again next hour at 803-404-6100. Coming up, we have What's Trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry. And Hardy's doing a really cool thing with Hardy's. We 3 straight weekends. We'll be out at different Hardy's locations, and we'll be set up for a couple hours. We want you to please bring some school supplies out. We're trying to help Richlands 1 and 2, make sure those kids are all supplied up for the school year. First 100 folks who drop off supplies will be getting a little certificate or coupon for a 3-piece chicken tender from Hardee's. So we're starting that this weekend on Saturday, and we're going to do it the next 3 weekends. We'll tell you the location coming up here next hour. I don't have the paper in front of me, but I will next hour, I promise. All right, What's Trending at 2, coming up on the halftime show is Elijah Campbell's going to come help me out. That is next here on The Game. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Elijah Campbell punching buttons, saving me from me. Thank you.
Like
Thank
a buffer.
you, sir. Yes.
A buffer.
A buffer. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry. Obviously, we've talked a bunch about with South Carolina. Football, SEC Media Days, Luke Doty, Boogie Huntley, Debo Williams will be representing the Gamecocks at SEC Media Days. We've discussed that. Also, South Carolina moving themselves forward with a new, and we kind of call it's kind of like a GM, Director of Player Personnel. But Darren Usher, a graduate of South Carolina, has been hired as the Director of Player Personnel and Recruiting at South Carolina. We've talked about it. Usher, resume pretty good at Oregon. Also at Auburn for a couple years. Boise State for like 7. All of his stops, good recruiting classes that he's been part of putting together. So for having to hire someone in this weird kind of time frame, you couldn't have found a better guy with a better resume. We'll see how it works. But just in the process of the hire, because the timing of the hire, it was going to make it, you thought, difficult to find someone with this kind of resume, but it kind of worked out because Usher went to UCLA to run their recruiting, and then Chip Kelly went, hey, glad you're here. I'm leaving. So then Usher didn't have a gig anymore, so he went back to Oregon, just kind of hanging out, doing stuff for the Ducks. So timing sometimes, like I said earlier, timing can be everything. So Darren Usher, the new Director of Player Personnel and Recruiting at South Carolina. One other South Carolina recruiting deal, Lex Cyrus, a 4-star wide receiver from Harrisburg. Everyone thought he was definitely going to go to Penn State. That's where he'd verbaled, but South Carolina's made a lot of headway and a lot of progress on Cyrus, thanks to Mike Furry, the wide receivers coach. Cyrus will announce where he's going to, where he's going to play football on July 11th. That's this Thursday, 3 o'clock at his high school. And South Carolina's got a shot here. We'll see where it goes. All right, so taking a look at some of the other things happening in the world of sports in a minute. But first, remind you, John Whittle coming up here right around 2:15. John will give us kind of like an update on what's up and what South Carolina baseball has been doing, whether it's transfer portal, the JUCO route. Players have been added to this roster, and John will give us a rundown on the new guys coming into the South Carolina baseball program. A couple things I thought were interesting, though, I want to hit in what's trending at 2. Novak Djokovic is going to go down as possibly the greatest tennis player of all time. Whether it's number of Grand Slam wins, number of total wins, just Novak Djokovic, I mean, he's going to be number 1 on a lot of lists. Also, he can be the most, he can be a pretty competitive dude. Like, is he John McEnroe or Jimmy Connors in their prime? No, they were different kind of guys. But Djokovic, in today's version of combative, I guess, Elijah, you would call Djokovic probably, you don't have a lot of guys like McEnroe or Connors or.
Well, they don't make him like that anymore.
They don't. Or there was a guy in the 70s called Ili Nastase who was nuts. They called him Nasty Nastase. He was crazy. You don't have like that. It's not like that today. But Djokovic isn't afraid to say what he thinks or speak his mind at times. And he played a match yesterday against Holger Rune. Now, Rune can sound like boo, right? Well, Novak Djokovic took some of the runes is going a little bit too far to boos toward Novak Djokovic. Now, you don't get a lot of tennis players getting booed. This isn't like team sports in America. Tennis players are a little sensitive about that type of thing because they're not used to it. So Novak Djokovic kind of taking these chants of ruined by the crowd to also boo to Novak Djokovic. Here's Djokovic post-match after his win being interviewed and talking about the crowd.
All those people that have chosen to disrespect the player, in this case me, have a good night.
interesting. He went on to say that he goes, because the guy who was doing the Q&A with him was trying to soften the whole thing up, right? And he's like, well, they were saying Rune or whatever. And Djokovic, like, he was having none of that. He was like, no. Look, bub, I've been playing professionally on tour for over 20 years. This ain't my first rodeo. I know what's going on, okay? And then he looks at the crowd, and now to be fair, he said to the people who came to play to watch tennis and to be supportive of tennis and the players, I applaud you and thank you. But now you folks who were booing, then he said, by the way, I played in a lot tougher joints than this. What you guys are doing, it's nothing. But I'll say this, Elijah, if it doesn't bother you, you don't bring it up.
Yeah, that's usually, if I'm not bothered by something, I don't even care to talk about it. But if something's really bothering me, but I don't want it to look like I'm bothered, I'm going to make it really hard or go out of my way to make it seem like I'm not bothered.
Right.
Don't print in the papers that I was mad.
Right.
Let the record show I'm not mad.
Exactly.
Ignore my tone.
I might leave this place and get in my car and cuss and scream, but you're not going to know I'm mad.
No.
And if something truly doesn't bother me, guess what? It doesn't bother me. And Djokovic was having a little bit of fun. He was playing the violin, like his tennis racket, like a violin for the whiners, the haters, whatever. But look, man, I get you tennis guys aren't used to this. Like professional athletes in American sports like football, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever, where you get booed, especially in the hardcore sports cities. But I listened to it. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't. It was like...
Of course not.
It wasn't. And Djokovic, you won. Bro, just come on. You know what you got to do? You got to thick that skin up a little bit, man. It just, you know what you do? I'll tell you what you do, Elijah. I say this all the time about thin-skinned athletes. What you need to do is get your phone, go to your bank app, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tap a total balance. Take a look. This is what you get for playing sports. And if people are going, really?
Then it shouldn't bother you.
Shouldn't bother you at all. I've always said this for the ultra-sensitive professional athlete. Just take your bank balance and make a banner right over your locker. And when you get the dopey questions from the media or that one media guy that's trying to get you to say something for clicks, before you go nuclear, turn around and look at your bank balance.
You'll never be sad again.
Whole different perspective, right?
And another thing, a reason I think he took way too much offense to that is because he is at such a high level in his career right now. He will look for anything for motivation. It's kind of like Kirby Smart telling his team, hey, somebody thinks you're going 7-5 this year. That's BS. Nobody thought Georgia was going 7-5 after they won the national championship. Nobody. Not a soul.
Nobody.
Kirby is the reporter that said that in the room with you right now? Are they here with us? No, they don't exist. They don't exist. He pulled something out of his rear to try to motivate his team because at that point you already won a national title. You got to get these high-level athletes some type of motivation, I guess. And if you're someone like Novak Djokovic, who's won 24 of these things, maybe you need something personal, or like Shaq making up that David Robinson didn't want to shake his hand when he was a kid or something like that. He completely made up a David Robinson story.
Yeah, or the way Michael Jordan just made up stuff to get motivated.
All the time. Yeah, like these guys, like it's borderline psychotic in a way to try to make something out of nothing because you need to fuel yourself because you have won so many times that regular winning just doesn't do it for you anymore.
And you might be right. Part of it might be I got to motivate myself. Plus, I'm watching Alcaraz and
which should be motivation enough because that kid kicked your butt.
Right,
has kicked your butt a lot.
I mean, you didn't. At the French, you got hurt and you couldn't continue on. You know, some of these young bucks are coming up on you. Your window's starting to close, and you might be right. He might be just looking for anything to get himself geeked to the next level. Remember, he just came off a meniscus surgery, I believe it was. So he might be looking for something. He might be going the Michael Jordan, the Kirby Smart route, whatever. Just something to get me to that extra level. Because right now, me at my normal high level, because of these young ones that are coming around, maybe I need a little extra juice. That might be part of it too.
There are players that would give non-vital organs to win Wimbledon. That guy has won it so many times that like just regular winning is more of a relief than actually euphoric.
Yeah, and it could be part of that as well. But yeah, Djokovic, it was like, dude, you made so much out of nothing. It was ridiculous. And I don't hate. I'm not one of these people that hates Novak Djokovic. I marvel at his skill. I really do. He is phenomenal at what he does. Now, does he say some things where you go, bro, really? Yeah, sure. But I'm not a. Put it this way: I got better things to do in my life than hate tennis players from across the ocean. Really, really not my.
Serbian tennis player hate is on the bottom of your hate list.
It's, it's just so far on the low end of it, I can't even see it. All right, what's trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry. John Whittle coming up here in a few minutes. I want to hit this Paul George story really quick. Because you're like me, you're a hoop dork. Paul George, did you get if you couldn't pull it because it was tough from the podcast, did you get to pull anything?
I found a 5-minute clip.
Yeah, we probably don't have time for the whole spiel, but basically, Paul George kind of broke the code, didn't he? I mean, he really went into the deep dive of a negotiation between a team and himself.
Which I can kind of appreciate from someone who's incredibly curious about that from a media standpoint. But if I'm a GM, I want to be really cautious with how I negotiate with Paul George from here on out. Because he will spill those beans on his podcast.
I mean, he said he was willing to stay with the Clippers. Basically, he said, I would have because Kawhi Leonard, I know this is going to sound ridiculous. Kawhi Leonard took less than the max to stay with the Clippers. He only took $50 million a year for 3 years. Probably has to work a second job at the mall. But so Kawhi Leonard took only 3 years at $150 million. So Paul George said, look, give me the same deal. I don't need a max. Give me the same deal you gave Kawhi Leonard. Clippers wouldn't do it. And then he came back to go, okay, how about a 2-year deal with a no-trade clause? Clippers said no to that too. So then George went, well, screw you, I'm going to leave. And then he hooked up with the Sixers. Now, I'll throw this at you. How much of this is the new world of the NBA? And we're not going to go into the minutia of this. There's a thing in the NBA called the second apron. And if you hit the second apron with your team salary, your salary cap, it's $189 million, I believe, is the second apron. Now you have a ton of restrictions on you that you don't have flexibility with your roster building and roster management. And teams in the NBA are doing everything to stay out of the second apron. And teams are like looking now and the future. The whole 3 superstar system thing, which I thought, by the way, hadn't worked for a while.
Basically, this was created to avoid that.
Yes. And so teams have to get away from that. I don't know how much of this was the Clippers trying to forward think about the second apron. Or was it, look, this ain't working because none of these guys can stay healthy and we're spending a lot of money on a bunch of injured dudes. But the Clippers could have kept Paul George and decided not to. That's number one. That's what happened here. They decided to take James Harden, the cheaper contract, than keep Paul George. So they picked the cheaper Harden over Paul George. 2, Paul George basically told you he didn't want to go to Philly. He just told you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey and you're Nick Nurse and you're Daryl Morey and you're sitting around going, great, guy hadn't even laced his shoes up here yet and he's already telling everybody he'd rather stay with the Clippers. Or the word was he wanted to go to Golden State second. Mm-hmm. And you just gave this cat over $50 million a year on a max deal.
At that point, if I'm Daryl Morey, I make Joel Embiid assistant GM because whatever you told him to make you want to play for us, do that with other players.
Right. I mean, it's just the whole thing is fascinating to me as an NBA dork. A, to get the insight on what really happened. B, that the Clippers decided not to keep Paul George for whatever the reasons were. And then C, that he basically told you, I didn't really want to come to Philly. They're just going to give me all this money because they had all this cap space. And, they got some guys that are really good, but I really didn't want to come here. Fascinating. John Whittle from the Big Spur coming up next on What's Trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry here on the Halftime Show on the Game. Men's Clinic of South Carolina. It's been basically Dr. Dan and his staff are there for you. You're a guy, you're getting older. Just, all the things that were natural and easy are not natural and easy anymore. Whether it's you're not sleeping like you used to, you have a lack of drive in life, in the bedroom, in the living room, just a lack of drive in general for anything. Maybe, you used to be able to pop those extra reps on the bench and now you can't. Maybe when you exercise the next day, you can't get out of bed for 2 hours. You have to call 911 to get you to the bathroom, whatever the case. Maybe you forget everything now. It might just be low testosterone. It might be that simple. Maybe you're stressed and thinking, oh, my God, what's happening to me? Call the Men's Clinic, 803-875-MENS. Set an appointment. Tell them your story. It could be low testosterone. They'll do lab work. If it is low T, they'll come back with a program that will get you back to being you again. 803-875-MENS. Make the call. Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Get yourself back to you again. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Elijah Campbell helping us out up until 3. Then Elijah and Jay take over with the postgame show here on the game. Time to talk a little Gamecock baseball. He thought he was safe. He really did. He's like, all these kooks at the game will leave me alone. I'll get to roll off to the Cape, watch some baseball. Sorry, John Whittle. Doesn't work that way, bub.
No, I always enjoy coming on with you guys. So I'm certainly happy to be here. And baseball season, there's always a little bit of downtime, but it never fully shuts down for sure.
Oh, so I know it's just a few weeks in, but the early returns on what you're watching, the first off season with Paul Maneri and the staff, just maybe a quick opinion on what's going on in this short time.
Yeah, I mean, it took a little bit for those guys to get going over there. The news broke on a Tuesday, and then press conference on a Thursday, and meetings on a Friday, and then all of a sudden there was a dead period, and it took a little bit for things to get going. But Monty Lee had some irons in the fire already, and had some leads on some folks, and they've ended up bringing in double digit new guys for a team that loses some very important players, but also brings back some pretty good pieces as well.
John Whittle from the Big Spur talking some Gamecock baseball with us here on the halftime show on the game. All right, first of all, out of all these guys that have come in, give me your favorite, whether it's JUCO, transfer portal, whatever the case. Give me your favorite guy that you can't wait to get an eye on.
I would say probably Henry Kasmer from Ohio State. I mean, he had 2 great seasons up there with the Buckeyes, all Big Ten freshmen. And played great again this year. Hit .322 with 10 doubles, few home runs, 39 RBIs. I mean, hit at the top of the order. Was solid defensively. He can play shortstop, can play second base. I think he's certainly somebody that you certainly needed to add to this team. You had to add some more competition at that shortstop position, and he's a really, really good one to bring in to fit that.
John Whittle, Big Spur. We're talking some Gamecock baseball here on the halftime show in the game. All right, a bunch of pitchers coming through the portal as well, John. Any of them catch your eye to say, that possibly could be someone that could really contribute?
Well, really only a few pitchers in the portal, several from the junior college ranks, which were very, very good, including the number 1 junior college pitcher in Brandon Stone. So he's certainly somebody who catches my eye from that standpoint. But if you look at just the transfer portal guys, I'd say Wyatt Evans, a lefty pitcher from Tennessee. He missed the 23 season, a lot of the 23 season with injury. 24 season, he didn't pitch. He didn't make the roster, but he was a guy who's mid-90s lefty, and that's something that South Carolina needs is some left-handed pitching. But he's off to a decent start, this summer, pitching in the MLB Draft League. 2.45 ERA and four appearances. So he's starting out nicely and will be a really good piece to work with for Terry Bruni.
It was interesting about Evans, John. I was kind of reading a few stories about it because I was like, wow, this guy was really good as a freshman, was hurt as a sophomore, and then just kind of like, I don't know. After that.
Sometimes coaching staffs and players don't really mesh.
Right.
And, it just happened to be that way with him this past year. And,
right.
There wasn't a change in coaching staff. It was still Vitello and Anderson there working with them, but they just didn't come together, just didn't click, and Tennessee obviously had a pretty good team, and he didn't make it. So he went into the portal for some other opportunities and decided to come back to the home state.
The Brandon Stone kid you brought up, his numbers are just filthy. He struck out 113 guys and walked 19. That just statistically seems like command, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what he's known for. I mean, he's certainly somebody who can throw forces for strikes. He's not an overpowering fastball guy. I mean, he's been up to 93, but he's going to be more in that 90, 91 mile an hour range. But like you said, he pounds the strike zone. He's got 4-seamer, 2-seamer, curveball, slider, changeup. Like he can wear you out and come at you in a lot of different ways.
John Whittle, Big Spur, talking some Gamecock baseball here on the halftime show on the game. All right, give me an under-radar guy. Maybe we're not talking about this guy enough, but since you've seen extensive video on everyone, hours of it, John, give me one of these guys that maybe we should be talking more about that could be more productive than we're thinking at this point in time.
From a transfer portal standpoint, I would say probably Max Colfer. Max Colfer and Dalton Mayshore both kind of jump out at me a little bit. Colfer, he didn't start at Texas A&M last year, but you look at why he didn't start. He was backing up the guy who was supposedly better than Cole Messina in the first team All-SEC catcher in Jackson Appel. But he's off to a nice start up in the Cape. And he played a bunch as a freshman. He was an early enrollee freshman, so he was supposed to be a high school senior when he was playing college ball. He got to school in January of 23, played that season and was their starter at the end of the year, and then was a backup to Appel. But he's a very good defensive catcher, and he's coming along offensively. But, South Carolina needed somebody who can go back behind the plate and really catch and really handle the pitching staff. Defense doesn't usually swamp. Ryan Bates is a guy returning who's a very offensive catcher and is coming along defensively, but you always want to have at least a defensive option that you can put back there behind the plate. So I think Colfer is an underrated pickup. And, Mayshore, he hit a lot when he was out there at St. Mary's, and he's got a great pedigree. Play center field. There's some guys who can go out there and compete in this field this year with Mayshore and Nathan Hall out of Clemson. So, I really like what he's done. Had an OPS of over 1,000. Little bit of a few strikeouts, but those come when you have 17 doubles and 13 home runs. So, those are the two that maybe folks haven't talked about quite as much that I really like.
Oh, you're heading to the Cape. Do you have your own house now? You just bought a home up there at the Cape so you can go watch ball, or what?
That would be nice. I'd get up there more often. I went up there in 2013, and that's the only time I've been up there. So it's been a minute since I've been, but certainly looking forward to it. South Carolina's got 6 guys up there, and I certainly know a few others from my time doing travel ball with the Canes. So I look forward to catching 3 or 4 or 5 games and seeing what's going on up there with some folks.
You don't mind me asking, you flying or driving?
I am flying.
Smart man.
I am flying this trip, yeah. That one, I love driving, as you and anybody who's followed me knows. I love getting in the car, getting behind the wheel, but some trips are just a little too far, and that one's a little too far.
Yeah, a little bit much there, John. That's why I asked you. I'm like, are you actually going to drive, you maniac? But smart man, take the plane.
Absolutely.
Hey, my man, it's always great catching up with you, and I appreciate your time like always. Safe travels to Cape Cod, all right, pal?
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you, Terry.
I appreciate you, John. John Whittle from the Big Spur. Talking some Gamecock. Just who came in? JUCO transfer, whatever the case. It's a very interesting, eclectic crew that they brought in so far in Paul Maneri's first off season, and we'll see how it all fits together. But it's going to be interesting in year one with the new baseball coach. We'll come back. It's was it January? What is it? January 8th or 9th? I'm losing track. 9th.
January.
Yeah. Gee, what did I say? January?
Yeah.
Hell is wrong with me?
A little warm for January.
I got to go to the men's clinic. Good. Jeez. July 9th, the greatest day in the history of the world is next on the halftime show here on the game. All righty, July 9th, not January 9th, but July 9th. Greatest day in the history of the world.
Close.
Sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Yeah, I got the J right. This day in 2016, Serena Williams won her record-tying 22nd Grand Slam title by winning Wimbledon again. 7th time that Serena Williams had won Wimbledon. She pulled even with Steffi Graf from most major championships in the Open era. Now, Margaret Court had the record, total record, but some of her majors were won before the Open era began in 1968. So Serena tied Steffi Graf at 22 in the Open era since the late 60s. And again, watching tennis my whole life, look, Steffi Graf was phenomenal. Martina Navratilova was ridiculous. Monica Seles, before getting stabbed, looked like she had something going on. But Serena Williams, I mean, most folks would say best women's tennis player of this generation. My lifetime, I think she's the best. She is. This day in 2011, Derek Jeter hits a home run for his 3,000th career hit. By the way, first Yankee, first player to reach that mark with the Yankees. Think about that for a minute.
Huh. Out of all the players.
You think about it.
All the Hall of Famers
all of
that
them
have played there. None of them reached 3,000.
Okay, let's see. Remember, Babe Ruth wasn't a hitter for a long part of his career. He was a pitcher.
But did stay long enough to hit over 700 home runs.
And so maybe he didn't get to 3,000 hits.
Did Barry Bonds get to 3,000 hits?
Barry did.
Barry did?
Yeah,
Okay.
Barry did.
Got walked so many times.
If you look at some of those, after his head grew, I'm just going to call it a weird physical anomaly. I'm not going to say steroids. When you look at the Barry Bonds who became giant Barry Bonds and had that third arm growing out of his back, look at the silly numbers. It's almost video game. The walks, it's just ridiculous. But, okay, so Lou Gehrig, obviously ALS, cut his career short. Mickey Mantle had injuries. Joe DiMaggio, you think DiMaggio would reach 3,000 hits, right? I mean, that would be your first thought. Because DiMaggio was such a great all-around hitter.
He had the hit streak, too.
Had the 56. By the way, do you know after that, I remember reading this, and I think this is right, because the top of my head doesn't work like it used to. After the hitting streak was broke against Cleveland, when the Indian third baseman made like 3 phenomenal plays to rob hits from DiMaggio, he went on and hit after that in 23 consecutive games.
So that's what, 79
would have been
80?
80 straight games. It's crazy. But DiMaggio, according to the AP, did not have 3,000 hits.
Wow. He didn't even have the highest batting average that year that he did that.
Ted Williams over 400. By the way, DiMaggio, think about it, your Ted Williams, you had 400, didn't win the MVP award.
Robbed.
Well, part of it is Williams was not a very likable guy. And the media liked DiMaggio more than they liked Williams. And plus the Yankees were better than the Red Sox. But
Marilyn Monroe also liked Joe DiMaggio a little more than Ted
I tell you what.
Which is a notch on the belt.
Guess what? I'm voting for the guy with the hot actress wife.
Yeah. That sometimes media votes can be swayed as simple as that. Just date Marilyn Monroe and then you're fine.
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe walking through the press room, saying hi to all the fellas. I might have swayed a vote or two.
You're never forgetting that.
Oh, God. Yeah. Especially back then.
You know, maybe Ted didn't get robbed. Maybe I just changed my mind.
Second thought, I probably would have voted for Marilyn Monroe. I mean, Joe DiMaggio, too. All right. In 2006, Italy won their 4th World Cup in a shootout, beating France in a 5-3 shootout. Game was 1-1. 2009, Joe Sakic retires after 23 seasons in the NHL with the Quebec Nordiques / Colorado Avalanche. Sakic now is the general manager for the Avs, and a lot of people think he's a phenomenal GM as well. Greatest day in the history of the world, sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Again, you have a ton of Wimbledon stuff. Pete Sampras winning Wimbledon. The guy, by the way, this guy, who I believe is back again as Novak Djokovic's coach, Goran Ivanisevic, was unseeded and won Wimbledon in 2001, one of the greatest runs in the history of Wimbledon by Goran Ivanisevic. 1991, South Africa readmitted by the International Olympic Committee to the Olympic movement, ending decades of sports isolation because, obviously, of apartheid. But they then could participate in the 1992 games, which I believe were, Atlanta was 96, 92. Was that Barcelona? I can't
Barcelona was 92.
Barcelona 92, Atlanta 96. So I got it right. Whoa, who would have known?
Look at you.
Look at me. I think it's January, but look at me get it right.
That's ultimate sports guy brain right there. What month is it? Couldn't tell you, but I can tell you when the Olympics were, where they were.
Yeah, my family just shakes their head in disgust. They really do. They're like, why can't you be this smart about anything else? Like, I can't.
Parents feel the same way.
I don't have enough room in my head for anything else. I'm really sorry. My brain's not that big. But I do find it ironic. Don't get me wrong. What went on in South Africa forever was atrocious. But the International Olympic Committee, when it comes to sports, the crimes that they broke with bribery and all these other things, white-collar crime, I guess. Sort of like, hey, pot, I'm kettle. Hey, kettle, I'm pot. Not to the extreme of South Africa, obviously, but still the International Olympic Committee, bunch of white-collar criminals. All right, we'll get a couple more. On this day in 1988, some dude named Nolan Ryan became the 7th pitcher to win 100 games with 2 different teams. Obviously, one's the Mets. What's the other one there? Elijah Campbell.
The Mets and...
This is 1988.
1988, Mets and the Rangers.
I think the Rangers later. It's the Astros at that point.
Oh.
You were thinking. You were looking. You were leaning. I saw you leaning.
It was either Astros or Rangers. I couldn't remember which one played for first.
You know, I wonder how many. Because again, off the top of my head, I don't know how many games he won with the Rangers. Because he pitched. Because he pitched till he was what, 75?
Yeah, and pitched until his arm was falling.
And he was still throwing 98.
And he was still landing punches on the head of Robin Ventura.
It's still the best ever. Noogie and Robin Ventura. Give him the noogs.
If you slow it down a little bit, you can see the minute that Ventura approaches the mound and Nolan Ryan throws his glove off, there is like a frame where you can be like, oh, bleep, I'm making the wrong decision.
Why did I come out here?
Yeah, like there was a little bit of regret. He didn't get to the mound as hard as he started to charge, if that makes sense.
This old guy is going to bow up on me. Oh no. But I wonder, like Texas Rangers, I wonder how many wins he had, because he had 100 with the Mets and 100 with the Astros. I have to look up and see how many ended up with the Rangers. 1967. A 17-year-old and a 14-year-old swam to world records. The 17-year-old was a dude named Mark Spitz, who went on to win 7 gold medals at the Olympic Games in Munich in 72. The record was broken by Michael Phelps in Beijing. So Spitz was 17. Katie Ball was 17, broke world records. Get this one. 14-year-old Debbie Meyer also set a couple of world records at the Santa Clara International Invitational Swim Meet. Teenagers tearing it up back in the late 60s in swimming. All right, greatest day in the history of the world, which is July 9th, sponsored by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. We'll pop back in here, our Firehouse subtext of the hour, and maybe we'll talk to Jay Phillips a little bit, talk to Elijah Campbell, get you ready for the post-game show, which is coming up here on The Game. All right, quick correction. It was the Angels and the Astros, or Nolan Ryan, 100 games each. I think he pitched the most years of his career with the Angels. We're got a quick reading off the internet. Now, did he throw the most years with the Angels? Because he was with the Angels for a long time.
Actually, the Astros by 1 year. So he pitched 9 years in Houston, 8 for the Angels, 5 for the Mets, 5 for the Rangers.
It was interesting because it's just the history of the Angels, because the Angels can't get out of their own way. They won a World Series with the Rally Monkey, and they beat the Giants and Barry Bonds because baseball karma said, "Oh, Barry, you're not winning a World Series.
You're going to lose this team with 0 superstars."
Right, you're a miserable human being. The Angels in that time frame had not only Nolan Ryan, but a dude, and Jay will remember this guy named Frank Tanana. Tanana threw as hard as Nolan Ryan, and then Tanana's arm fell off. And Jay, remember he came back throwing for the Tigers about 71 miles an hour and was really good
also
for a while.
Also remembering he had a spectacular mustache, if I remember.
Yeah, he did.
Which is what matters the most.
Well, that's what helped him win extra games.
Sure.
Hitters would go, that mustache is mesmerizing.
Sure.
But yeah, so the Angels, despite having those two guys, still couldn't get out of their own way. It's a theme with the Angels. They never get out of their own way.
Like, and again, Elijah and I were actually talking about that World Championship or World Series Championship. We really shouldn't call it a World Championship, but that back then Disney, Mr. Eisner was like, "All right, listen, we need to sell the Angels, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to win the World Series, and then we're going to sell the Angels."
Right.
Because he's like, it's like what he said 10 years prior. He's like, we need some hit movies. And so then, I know he didn't make them, but they had Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Lion King.
Right. And Eisner tells Major League Baseball, look, you need to let us win the World Series so we can sell the
I don't know if he
Angels.
did that or not, but that's Disney for you. It's like, we're going, here's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have a plan. And they probably went into the board meeting like all matter of fact, like we're gonna win the World Series, and then we're gonna sell the team.
We're gonna have a team whose best players are Troy Glaus, David Eckstein, and Darren Erstad, and we're gonna win a World Series.
And who was
Garrett Anderson?
Garrett Anderson.
Yeah.
And then you
Tim
had
Salmon.
Mike Scioscia was the manager.
Scioscia was the manager, and who was the guy who was near the end of his career? He was DHing, but he was a right fielder. He was there forever, and they won it. It was late in his career, and I'm blanking on who it is, and I can see him, and I can't think of who it is right now.
Too. Not Jim Edmonds.
No,
that was definitely post Jim Edmonds.
He was right near the end of his career, and everybody talked about it was a wonderful story because he had suffered with the Angels for so long.
Suffering.
Do you have that line up in front of you?
We'll think about it in a second. But it's it's the brilliance of the people that run Disney. Is here's what we're going to do. We're going to win the World Series.
And they did. Yeah, little
Brad
rally
Fulmer?
monkey.
Yeah.
Huh?
No, Brad Fulmer was 27.
Nah.
The oldest guy in the starting line was Tim Salmon.
Tim Salmon. That's it. Tim Salmon's a guy. He suffered forever.
Yeah.
Finally won a World Series near the end of his time with the Angels.
My lasting impression of that World Series is the shot in the last inning of whatever game it was that they clinched, and Bonds alone in the corner of the dugout.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was like, there you go.
Oh, exactly. I believe it was game. They lost in 7. I think the Angels won in 7.
The picture that's worth a million words.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. I was like, it was just, he was such a miserable dude.
Didn't bother me.
Just a miserable guy.
Didn't bother me.
That's why, as great a player as he was even more of a miserable human being.
Yes.
And I have a tough time rooting for miserable people.
Can't do it.
All right, Firehouse Up text the hour. This is interesting. In hindsight, if South Carolina was going to go 5-7, would it have been better for Rattler to leave after the 2022 season and let Sellers just have it all last year to get the experience of playing as a freshman? Yes, if you're living in the world of the hot tub time machine or the phone booth from Bill and Ted, or that thing that Doctor Who jumps into or whatever, I guess yes. If you knew what you do now, but you didn't know that. Remember, you're coming off going to a Gator Bowl and winning 8 games. You got your quarterback back. And you think you got this fancy receiver duo, and you're going to, go off there and do damage. And I'm like anything in life, Jay. Think of like a bad moment you had in your life. If someone said,
if I'd only done it the other way,
could you go back and do it the other way?
I mean,
Sure, exactly. I know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, interesting is that's one adjective.
It's interesting, interesting little text. But we appreciate 803-404-6100. Real quick, and Jim Rome talked about it, and I was going to try to get to it. The Cooper Flag experience has started.
Well,
did you see what the NBA guy said about Cooper Flag?
My co-host yesterday during commercial breaks is telling me, dude, Cooper Flag is lighting up the Olympic team.
Yeah, I watched the highlights of it.
So I said, well, then just go ahead and make him an alternate now. I agree with what Dan Patrick said about him. This is another place where this stupid one and done, that's an NBA rule. I hope everybody understands that. They don't make them go to college. That an NBA, the NBA is missing an opportunity to immediately market this kid. Now, Dan said the right thing. He's going to Duke, but look, and I'm not naive, y'all, but he's going to Duke. He will drop out of Duke the second the NCAA tournament is over. Whether if they win it, great. If they don't, then. But whenever the NCAA's are done, he drops out of a prestigious university.
He's done,
and that's all well and good. I'm not, but NBA, stop doing this. Draft them. Make the G League a minor league if you think he's not ready for your league yet.
And it's interesting because
they could market him now.
They started doing it with some of the stuff they're doing in the G League with the hope of one day becoming what the European training system is and feeder system. Because let's be honest here, and Elijah knows this. He watches a ton of ball. Right now, the most fundamentally sound players in the NBA are Euros.
Yeah. Because that's what they teach. Because they're also being taught from age 15 onward.
I mean, Luka Doncic was 9 years old playing in professional leagues.
Around grown men. Where would Flat go if 2 weeks ago when the draft was held, he goes...
He's number one. He's number one, bro.
He's number one.
So it's not even a conversation. He's the number one pick in the draft.
Why is the NBA missing that opportunity? I asked that rhetorically, obviously, but I thought they were going to get rid of that.
Well, here's my thought process on it is they didn't like babysitting high school kids.
They have a G League now, Ter. It's a minor league.
I'm
Imagine
with you.
that. A minor league, developmental league.
When they started the overtime elites and everything, I thought that's what this was going to be, right? They've already shut down one teenage team. I don't know, but I know this. The NBA guys are walking the court going, Coop can play.
Yeah, I mean, good for John Shire and Duke to get him for a year.
And they invited a high school kid to the Olympic tryouts. Yeah. They've never done that before. All right. Post-game show next. Elijah, thanks for helping him, man.